It's that time of the day. Yep, it's pub time, and we're here in the GB News pub for Talking Pints. I'm here with the former chief executive of Aston Martin, Dr. Andy Palmer. Andy, welcome.
Thank you very much.
To Talking Pints.
Looking forward to this. Thank you.
Very good. What, the drink or the conversation, or both?
Well, we'll see how both go. But the drink is very, very good.
You've been described by Auto Express as the most influential British person in the global automotive business. That's, wow, that's pretty big stuff. So I have to ask you, how did your career in all this begin? How did you get to a position where that sort of thing's said about you?
They were very kind.
Well, there must have been something behind it.
I left school at 15 and became 15, and at 16 became an apprentice. So that was the route. Inspired by my father, who bought me an A-series engine when I was. Do
you mean
14?
You didn't go to university?
I didn't. Well, I didn't go to university in the traditional sense. I kind of caught up later at night schools and what have you. And I did my apprenticeship. Eventually ended up at British Leyland. Was fortunate.
What a memory.
What a memory. So right in the middle of the sort of red Robbo times.
Yeah.
They were good enough to put me through a master's degree in engineering. Came to the period of time when the Japanese industry was so important, and I read a book called The Machine That Changed the World and thought I'd better go and get a bit of that. So I ended up going to Nissan.
Was that when they invested money in Sunderland?
Yeah. Actually, I joined just as they were setting up engineering function in the UK, and I joined basically as part of that, and eventually ended up running Nissan's engineering in Europe. And then the alliance happened with Renault. Renault essentially took control of Nissan.
Yes.
I was asked to go to Japan and run the light commercial vehicle business. So I transformed, I guess, from being just a pure engineer into a business guy. And then it really took off, and I eventually ended up being the chief operating officer of Nissan, number 2 to Mr. Goan. Sometimes we don't talk about Mr. Goan anymore. And then 7 years ago, I got this telephone call that said, "Do you want to be the chief executive of Aston Martin?"
Couldn't believe it, could you?
Look, I went to school 5 miles down the road, and it was
the schoolboy dream.
Well, yes, exactly, and I couldn't say no. And so I had that opportunity to live out a dream that I'd had since I was 20 years old, which was to run a car company.
And the glamour?
And the glamour, yes.
Of Aston Martin, James Bond, and all the rest of it.
Well, it's great to see the new.
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
Well, it's got four Aston Martins in, and I was really, really proud to put the cars in that movie.
You've had an amazing career, but what really interests me is that you're very, very much in the vanguard of electric cars, of battery production. And I'm going to tell you this, Andy, I'm a bit sceptical about all this. I'm a bit sceptical about what the price of these cars is going to be. I'm a bit sceptical about the battery life, the range. I'm a bit sceptical about how on earth you recycle these, because basically the batteries are vast, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
An electric car is sort of a carapace and a battery, basically.
About 50% of the cost of the car is the battery. Yeah. And they're big, heavy brutes that you have to deal with.
But I'm sceptical, and I'm even more sceptical about where this energy is going to come from. I mean, you know, if we're burning trees that come across the Atlantic from North America, and we burn them in Yorkshire, I mean, that's hardly green to me. It doesn't sort of add up to me. And if we're burning natural gas to charge batteries. So I just need some convincing all round about this. So explain to me, and obviously the Prime Minister, you know, is a big advocate of this. And I know that if I was to go out and buy a Tesla, I'd get amazing tax breaks on it. So convince a skeptic that electric cars really are the future.
Well, first of all, look, I was the architect of the Nissan Leaf, which is what you're referring to.
Yep.
So obviously I spent a great deal of my career basically bringing electric cars to market. And by the way, I was working on hydrogen fuel cells at the same time. So,
but I see this is what interests me. This is what interests me. Doesn't hydrogen also have amazing potential?
Yes, it does. And I think I'm going to advocate electric cars, but I'm also going to say that government should not dictate a particular solution. Otherwise, you end up with a problem like diesel, where we've been told to buy diesels,
and we all did,
and we all did, and suddenly you've got some unintended consequences. I think what has to happen is governments around the world have to set the targets. So whatever it is, zero CO2, X amount of particulates, whatever.
Not really achievable, is it?
But what you've got to do is then you've got to get the engineers working on that. And look, it's in terms of cost, and they are expensive. In terms of CO2, an electric vehicle uses way more carbon to manufacture than a traditional internal combustion engine. But of course, it's zero tailpipe, so over life, you get the benefit. The key here is. If I can take you back to when we were younger and the mobile telephone. Remember those mobile telephones? Only wealthy bankers could afford them. They're very expensive. Fast forward to today, everybody's got a mobile phone. It comes down something called the Moore's curve. And the Moore's curve is about basically you bring in volume and your cost reduces almost exponentially. And electric cars are on.
Although I must say, iPhones
curve.
Aren't that cheap these days. But
they're
anyway.
not that cheap. But there are methods of getting you into one and making it affordable. So the democratization of net zero carbon is really, really important. And the point there is that you've got to stop talking about zero emission, and you've got to start talking about net zero carbon. In other words, when you consider the future transportation, you've also got to take into account the carbon that's used to manufacture the battery, manufacture the car.
And you've been honest about that it takes more CO2 to manufacture in the first place.
Yeah, look, if you were to take a traditional battery today, remember I'm an advocate for EVs, right?
No, I mean...
So if you were to take a battery today, it takes about 7 kilowatt hours to produce a 1 kilowatt hour battery. So a massive amount of energy in creating the battery. What you've therefore got to do is address that, which means, of course, that you build the vehicles using sustainable energy. Now, within that mix, you need to have the alternative technologies considered. And what are they? Fuel cell, for sure. But remember that 99% of hydrogen is produced from oil and gas. So you've got to move to a new methodology of creating hydrogen. Fuel cell, expensive, so there's an intermediary solution which is called hot hydrogen, which is basically combusting hydrogen in an internal combustion engine. Quite interesting because you're using existing assets and a little bit about something there in line with what you see in Formula One movies.
And I was looking at HVO on this programme last week. Looking at HVO, because, living in Kent, there was no fuel, but a couple of local businesses were using HVO, which, of course, hydrogenates used vegetable oil. So there are.
So there are. And e-fuels. E-fuel takes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, turns it into gasoline. So there are lots of alternatives. So my view is that you can't simply mandate one technology. What you've got to do is you've got to allow the free flow of ideas. You've got to create a Darwinism, and you've got to allow for the survival of the fittest.
So the manufacture of these cars will become more efficient in time, the price will come down, and you quoted the example of mobile phones, cell phones. Fine. Where's the electricity coming from?
Well...
Because there are 36 million cars on the road.
Yes.
Right? If from 2030 there are going to be no new sales of petrol or diesel car, where's the electricity coming from? I mean, we've got real problems of energy supply right now.
We have indeed, and of course you need to plan. You need to plan for that. Look, the good news...
Is government genuinely planning for these things? Does it have the long-term strategy to be able to do this?
Some governments around the world clearly are.
That obviously means ours is.
Others are taking a little time to get there.
That, are you?
The point is that in most cases, and if you do it well, first of all, most electric cars are charged in the night time. And actually, you're not...
Hence, when other electricity...
When other electricity is being used. The second part is, if you've got enough electric cars out there, you can also go from car to grid. After I was living in Japan during the tsunami, the big great tsunami, and saw, basically people perishing because they didn't have electricity. And I brought very quickly to market through Nissan something called Leaf to Home, and that was the ability to send electricity in the other direction and power a home. Now, if you're smart and if you're holistic about your energy solutions, and if you've got an industrial strategy that backs that up, then basically you can use the cars that are out there as a storage medium.
No, okay, fine. Now, the battery is a huge part of the car. It takes a lot of lithium.
Yes.
A lot of lithium, which used to be valueless,
Yeah.
but not anymore. It takes a huge amount of lithium to produce these batteries. I am told by those that are very, very sceptical about electric cars that there's no method yet being produced for genuinely recycling these lithium batteries. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. It's expensive, but it's lithium, and indeed most of the minerals that go into a battery can be recycled.
All right.
If I put it into steps, first life of battery in the car. During the life of a car, the charge drops to about 80% of its new, so you get a decay, and then the battery is no longer any use. So it goes into second use. Second use of battery is for example, storing energy from wind farms or solar farms. At the end of that life, then you need to take the battery back to what's called a black mass, which means you don't take it right
But in
away.
terms of storage, if we charge up the battery of an electric car, how long will that charge hold for? It'll diminish with every hour that goes by to some extent.
A battery its ability to hold a charge will diminish over a 6 or 7 year life. So, and the same as your mobile phone, frankly. So after 6 or 7 years, you need to move it onto second life. And then third life is about taking it back to black mass. You can put it in a shredder. You can bring it back. You don't need to take it all the way back to the mineral level, but you can bring it back to the compound level that can be used in new batteries, and you can recycle. Now, that circular economy is really, really, really interesting, but at the moment it's also not cost effective.
Electric cars are the future, then?
As sure as death and tax. They are the future.
That's a pretty certain answer.
Absolutely certain. Now, but on the edges, there will be alternative technologies. There will be hydrogen in HGVs. There will be, I think, e-fuels used in sports cars. So the internal combustion is not gone forever, I don't believe.
But you're still a fan of internal combustion yourself,
of course,
aren't you?
I love. Absolutely.
And you were a racing driver at one point?
I would like to say that I'm still a racing driver.
Really?
But not a very good one.
So that's your sin, is it?
That's my passion, I have to say. It's still, when I can, 24-hour races.
Well, I have to say, Andy Palmer, you've had an amazing career in the industry. You've won the most astonishing accolades. I've learned a bit tonight about electric cars. I'm still not totally convinced. But hey, that was Dr. Andy Palmer. What do you think?
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.